Hey, and welcome to another episode of Grit in the Wild podcast. I'm your host, Adam Short,
And I'm your co host, Melissa Short.
and together we're here to talk about spiritual abuse, toxic faith, high control groups, religious trauma, and everything in between, including the recent and ongoing scandals within the hypercharismatic church. And it's been a couple weeks since we had our last episode, and so we thought it'd be time to get back on here and just kind of have a conversation like we normally do. And so I think today we just felt like kind of opening up the book, so to speak, and just kind of sharing how we're doing. Right. And
Yeah.
just
Yeah. We didn't have like anything like major pressing. I was like, what should we talk about? And just, I don't know. Yeah. I think I'm feeling kind of just vulnerable in this current state that we're in and just tender a little bit and tired, honestly.
yeah, tired for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been a lot has happened in a short period of time. And I think for me, it can get fatiguing, like I have these moments where I kind of come up above the water and the surface of everything, and it's like, ooh, that's been a lot.
Yeah. 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 So today's what, March the 2nd, and we're recording this March 2nd. And just since February 3rd, I just go back a month. And that was the day that the Firefly report was released for IOPKC survivors and victims. And I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but that same day was also the day that Bethel released a statement about Sean Bolt's, quasi public statement. It was more directed at alumni. And then since then, there have been several other rounds um, of stories that have come out from witnesses and firsthand reports of the Michael Brown
Yeah.
scandal too. So I think, and I was sharing this on the open spaces the other night with Susan Tuma, that it feels like waves. It's waves. It's not just waves of the external circumstances, right? Like each layer of additional victims come forward and share their story, or you have an independent investigator releases their report, or you have like audio that was released last week by Joel Richardson calling out Michael Brown, which I really appreciate Joel's straightforwardness so much. But like all of that kind of stuff happening externally, events and unfoldings, as it were. But then internally, all of the waves happen too,
Yeah.
right? So, you've got the gamut. You've got the grief, you've got the loneliness, you've got the pain, and then you've got occasional glimmers of hope. At least I can speak for myself, where you feel like, wow, okay, maybe this thing is moving forward in the right direction here and there. Like very,
Yeah.
very sparsely, I might add, but you've got just the melange of emotions that happen, along the way. So I don't know. I don't really have like a specific, you know, one emotion or state that I want to focus on, but I just feel like I'm feeling like all of the different things. Sometimes not all at once, but like definitely within a day's time, I feel like I can go through the gamut. How about you?
Yeah. I definitely connect with like the different emotions. I think grief is a big one that I've identified. Like, right, just with all the different stories. And then just, right, we're still healing personally, like our own healing process. And then you add, like, I think all of these things coming out has, in a way, like you're going along healing from your own religious trauma and spiritual abuse. And then you're following these stories of these people that you trusted and looked to lead you in different seasons, and you're seeing all these things come out, and
Yeah.
it's just another layer. Like for us, at least I'll speak for me, it
Yeah,
like reopened a lot of
for
wounds.
sure.
And it was like another layer of deconstructing and re-examining beliefs and bringing everything to the table. And so, yeah, like for me, it's like it's every each time something else has happened, it feels a bit like grief.
Mhm.
And then just, right, holding your own stuff, like, holding your own stuff and then holding the collective stuff of the
Mhm.
greater church, right? Because we all feel that, like, for those of us or even if you don't consider yourself a Christian, right? Even if you were a part of this environment,
Yeah.
like, there's a collective grief
Right.
when you've lost something, and I think, like, I'm so aware of how much I've lost not only like in church and ministry in regards to our faith life, like even though we're still Christians and we still believe in God, like so many elements of our faith life
Mhm.
and church and all of that community has been lost. And it's been something we've had to grieve and continue to grieve. And then it's
Yeah.
like this stuff is just more and more and more. And then you're like hearing stories of other people. And so yeah, I guess all that to say it is a lot to hold.
Yeah.
And I think it's important, like, for me, like taking moments to like catch my breath and just feel the weight of that and feel the emotions with that
Mm.
and just sit with it. Like really like and sit with it in that like, yeah, just allowing yourself to feel grief, feel sadness,
Yeah.
and kind of connect with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, I can go back in time, what, maybe 3 years. I remember a specific time in my life before these scandals sort of were forefront as they are now, but still very much in the deconstruction journey, for a long time now. But I was just thinking, was it like 3 or 4 years ago? I remember you and I would sit down and you would, kind of probe me for how are you feeling, and I was like trying to get in touch with a lot of the grief, but there was a point that I wouldn't go any further.
Yeah.
And I would just and it wasn't because I was trying to avoid it as far as I know. Now, maybe I was, but it's like I wasn't trying to avoid this. It was like my whole system would shut down and I wouldn't be able to go any further. Like
Yeah.
she does trauma work and parts work with internal family systems, and so she would help me. I mean, I've had a therapist for a good while now, but she was kind of like my, you know, second therapist because she's my wife, right? And so, like, I highly recommend the integrative work around IFS, which is internal family systems. Of course, you know way more about it than I do, but I just remember being at a dead end so many times with that. Now, I will say I'm actually able to sit with it. I'm
Yeah.
actually able now, does that mean that there aren't times where I do wanna shut it off? Absolutely. This week, I had a night like that where I just felt like, "Oh my god. This feels like I am carrying around a boulder." But it's not like a weight you I don't know how to describe it. It's not a weight you're carrying on you, it's like a weight in you.
Yeah.
And, anybody who's been through grief, like intense grief, you understand what I'm talking about. Um, I don't have a point to this other than I'm just
It's
trying to
okay.
unpack my
Yeah.
experience and that I wanna, like, pat myself on the back because I'm now at a place where I can sit with a lot of that grief.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, to me, that's progress.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, like, I love, like, just tracking. We both have kind of been on this journey together and tracking with your journey. And I remember what you were talking about. Like, that was hard. Like, you would know something was going on and we'd try to engage. And it was like your protective parts
Yeah.
were like,
There you go.
I'm not going any further. And I think I just want to say like that, like, I think that, right, healing's not linear. It's not this like straight line. And I think again, our body and our nervous system is so wise that your body knew, like, this is as far as I actually am able to go right now. And it doesn't mean that there was anything wrong with you
Right.
or that you were resisting. It was just your body wasn't ready. And I think
Yeah.
what's been beautiful is to observe, right, like the process unfolding naturally and in the way that your body wanted to. And then,
Yeah.
like you're saying, like now you feel ready. Now it is okay to hold it.
Mm.
So I think it's okay if it feels like a lot. Like if you're listening and you're like, it does feel like too much. Like I think our bodies really know the timing of when it's okay to process certain things. And so I think sometimes like we look at avoidance, we're like, oh, that's so bad. I mean, we don't want to avoid our whole lives. But I think too, if you're engaging in your healing, like it's okay if it's slow. It's okay if you don't feel ready to engage certain parts or even like engage collectively, right? Like if you're in your own healing
Yeah.
process, like, it can feel a lot to hold space for other people's stories, like,
Yeah.
that takes a work, right, like, within ourselves too, to really be
Definitely.
able to, like, if you're in your own grief and your own pain and your own trauma, trying to like, have room for somebody else's too. So
Yeah.
I think that's okay
Normal.
to
Yeah.
like know that that's like it's okay to not be there yet and it's okay to let it unfold how it needs to.
And which, if you think about what you just said, it's okay to be there, or what did you say? It's okay to not be there yet. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
So contrast that, and I'm just realizing that as you said that that is such a contrast to what we were in, what was pumped into us in the hypercharismatic churches.
Yes. Oh
Think
my
just
gosh.
let's just talk about that for a minute. Okay,
Good segue.
yeah, you got mission, which is paramount, right? You got mission, whether the mission was 24/7 prayer, like it was at IHOP, or at Bethel, the mission was, you know, world revival basically at all costs.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me see if I can articulate this. There is an end goal in the mission, right? There was an end goal in 24/7 prayer. There is an end goal, I think, that's taught by Bethel, which is worldwide revival and the seven mountains being conquered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the influence of the kingdom is actually being exerted upon those seven mountains. Okay. That is an end goal. That is actually an end goal, although it is probably impossible to know whether you ever hit that end goal, right? Because when do you get to enough 24/7 prayer? When is it enough to saturate? Like, how do you know if you've saturated every nation with 24/7 prayer? How do you know if you have achieved world revival? You know, so contrast that with what you just said, which is each of us in our personal journey now trying to heal from a lot of the harm and the toxicity of these movements. You said it's okay if we're not there yet. And
Yeah.
so let me
Yeah.
push that further and say it's actually normal to not be there yet, because back to our previous episode, the title of our episode was "There's no pot of gold over at the end of the
Yeah.
rainbow." Because so being whatever there is an elusive, unattainable impossibility.
Yeah. And this goes back to like process and slowness. And we're like, especially in the hyper charismatic movement, it's so performative, like
Yeah.
performance based Christianity. And what's odd is like, I remember at Bethel in particular, it was like they would talk about not performing. So like again, in word, we're not performing, like we're doing this from a place of our identity in Christ or, but in reality it was very performative. Like does that make
Oh,
sense? And, like,
yes,
so with
100%.
performance, right, what you're saying, the not enough, like, that's a shame message, right? When we
Yeah.
don't feel like enough, that's shame driven. So it's like the whole messaging behind that is almost this, like, this shame-based kind of I don't like to use all the Christian words, but I don't know what other word
Right,
to use, like,
yeah.
scarcity kind of mindset, like, there's not enough, and I'm not enough, and I've gotta perform for God, and so it's this striving and this achieving based faith, and it's like what's healing it undoes all of that. Healing's like, we're gonna slow way down, and we're gonna go a little bit deeper here,
Yeah.
and we're gonna pace, and we're gonna go through a process, and we're gonna recognize that the process isn't I always say this, like A, B, C.
Yeah,
Like you said, it
nonlinear.
might be
Yeah.
A and then F and then G and then P, and then, just it
Mhm.
goes all over the place. And I think I don't know, for me, I'll say this, like, in my own faith, I don't wanna put this on anybody because I know people that are listening, you guys are all in different places. Some of you have deconstructed out of your faith, some of you aren't sure, some of you are Christians, and I just wanna validate and just acknowledge wherever you're at makes sense and is valid. And, like, I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking so we were kinda well, you were talking about the nonlinear.
Yes, like, yes, process. So what I was gonna say was, like, a big part I feel like of like Jesus is like slowness and process. Like I think there's even like scriptures that speak to that, right? Like the Lord's patience. Like it
Mm,
feels like God's being slow, but the Bible says that like it's actually patience.
mm.
And I just
Yeah.
feel like that relates so much to our healing journey, but more than that, like our faith journey. Like it's not doesn't have to be this
Mm.
fast-paced, forceful, result-oriented thing. Like, fruit doesn't always look like success. Like, sometimes it's just right? Like, I don't know. Does that make
Well, I'll
sense?
tell you what image came to my mind. I was just thinking, like, you talk about fruit, okay? I'll tell you what helps me a lot is looking at examples in the natural world
Yeah.
to help explain spiritual concepts,
Yeah.
or if you don't want to use the word spiritual, that's fine. You know, invisible concepts, right? Things
Yeah.
that I can't actually put my hands on and touch. So here, fruit for a minute. Let's talk about fruit.
Yeah.
And you can apply this, I think, to any fruit, whether you're in the business world, you're in the whatever world, education, you name it. So the image that came to mind was actually back here behind our house. There's like 50 acres that we get to use and run around, and our son runs down there and goes to the pond and catches frogs. So I was thinking about those briars down there.
With the
Those
lemon ball things?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've got these. So if y'all aren't from the South, so briars are
Yes, tell
thorny,
them what the what briars are.
except these are briars on steroids. So they're thorny, nasty plants. And I grew up around here in the Carolinas, and I had never run across these things until we built our house. And you go back there, and there's like tons of these, and they can be 10 feet tall. And these thorns are every bit of 2 inches and plus,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But every year, and I remember when our son was what, 3,
Yeah, 2
we'd
and
go
3.
down there, bring a bucket, and these fruits would come up on these thorn bushes. They're not even bushes, they're almost as big as trees. Like the trunks could be a few inches in diameter. And they're pretty. Like they look like an orange. But if you and I was just kind of curious, like, what is this thing? This is like it looks like a tropical fruit, but it's growing on this god awful briar.
Thorny,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you cut it open, there's all these seeds that come out, and that's how it propagates. There's all these seeds go everywhere, and it creates more. So that's the image that I was thinking of when you're talking about fruit. So think about it. All that to say this: back here in the woods, while we're just going through our life, through our busy life, going to work, raising our son, whatever, those bushes are back there creating fruit.
Yeah,
Okay. Nobody is making any fanfare about it.
right.
Nobody is clapping for it. Nobody is counting how many fruits show up on those bushes, right? It's just every year they produce just like clockwork. And then they fall
Yeah.
down to the ground and they create more plants. That fruit back there is bad fruit.
Yeah.
It's a toxic fruit that will harm you if you eat it. Um, and I guess what I'm trying to say here is in the hyper charismatic movements, we have so focused on the fruit where it's like you see a fruit, which is we call healings and miracles and things like that
Yeah.
fruit,
Yeah.
but that's actually not the fruit that we hear the Bible describe, is it? The
Yeah.
fruit that we hear about in the Bible, the fruit of the Spirit, I'm thinking about in Galatians 5, right? If I remember the right passage, is the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace. What else? Loving kindness,
Patience, kindness,
patience,
goodness,
all that
gentleness. Yeah.
stuff.
Self-control.
And then at the end, it says, against such things there is no law, I believe is how it's
Yeah.
written. Well, so if you notice that what's not listed in there is our signs and wonders.
Yeah. Or
So,
revival.
right. So I guess 2 points from that. One, fruit's going to happen because that just naturally
Yeah.
happens, right? So we're just going to have fruit. Number two, look at what kind of fruit it is. And just because it's a pretty looking fruit doesn't mean it's the real deal.
Yeah.
And I think that is a big thing I'm trying to figure out as I am in a whole nother layer of deconstruction right now, trying to make sense of there's a lot of debate going around right now on Twitter about the, like Bob Jones and, how he continued to be platformed even after it was publicly acknowledged that he was committing clergy sexual abuse, I think back in the early 90s. And then Morningstar replatformed him. And then when we were at Bethel, he was platformed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you're trying to parse out, and at least I'm trying to parse out Was anything in this man's life, Bob Jones, and then some of these others like Paul Kane and just there's the list goes on of all these guys, these prophetic people, these supernatural, supposedly supernatural, whatever, whoop de doo people. What or not what, but how much of this was real? How much was fake? How much of it was neither? And that is a hard one to figure out. I don't have the answer.
Well, and I don't know either. Like, it is hard. I'm not sure where to place that. And I think so many of us are in that place. Like, I think what bothers me about it is like as okay, one of the arguments is like yeah, like arguing like, well, these words were real. And I'm like, yeah, but like to me that
Real.
doesn't even matter. Like, okay, I don't even
What does
okay,
that mean? When you say,
wait,
what do you mean? I don't want to interrupt you, but when you say real, what does that mean to you?
meaning, okay, like some people are like, oh, but Sean gave me, for example, Sean Bowles.
Okay.
Sean Bowles gave me a word and it was really accurate. And I'm like, okay, but for me, this is me, like, I don't really care if Sean Bowles gave an accurate word or not. Like, again, this is going back to what we're talking about. Like, I think the fruit is like a person's character, like who you are at your core. I think that in the life of Jesus, that was always emphasized more. He always spoke in the parables to like the
Yeah.
heart of a person. Like even with the Pharisees, it was all about them, like all of the external acts, but he was like, what's like, right, the whitewashing and
Yeah.
like, but inside you're like a tomb. And I think like I'm more concerned about the fact that like, okay, maybe he had a whole bunch of accurate words, but he also, right,
Yeah.
if he actually did this, like his character and who he was, like that matters, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, that kinda cancels out the good
Yeah.
that you did, and so, I think what bothers me is that, again, in this movement, it's like we wanna dismiss who that person is and their
Just write them
character
off. Yeah.
because they did these few like, "Oh, but they did these few things that were, like, miracles," but I'm like, Jesus said, right, like, "Away from me, I never knew you."
Yeah.
So, like, why are we I don't know what I'm trying to
I,
say. Like, why
I,
are we
I understand.
focusing on the few good things you
Well, let
did
me be the devil's
when,
advocate.
like, all this stuff was like
I totally validate all that
yeah,
and completely agree with you viscerally. Abso-freaking-lutely. But here's why I think to answer your question, like at least
yeah,
for me, um, why it matters is because these people had so much influence in our lives, right? As spiritual leaders. And so you gave them so much trust. You trusted them. You believed that they were hearing from God. And so you actually rested your faith on their words. Now,
yeah,
now, having said that, I can say for myself, like, was my faith resting on their words to where now that I find out their faith, that my faith is not there anymore? No, no, because I met God in an encounter. Nobody could ever talk me out. I don't really care what your IQ is. It makes zero difference to me because I met God in an encounter by myself in high school. Nobody was around. He came and visited me in my lowest point of life.
yeah,
Okay. So nobody can, Paul Kane's, you know, Paul Kane and Bob Jones and all those guys, Mike Bickles, the fact that they were frauds does not change my foundation in the encounters and relationship I've had personally with God. However, it does shake me a lot.
yeah.
It
And it
shakes
and
me a
it
lot. Not because not because of what you just said, like, yeah, we should place more emphasis on the character than the words, but I think it's just stating what occurred, which is we have emphasized that in the hypercharismatic movement to where now you've got bodies everywhere and you got people who don't know which end is up because their life has been potentially even more profoundly impacted by some of these prophetic folks than even me, like being affected by them, and so that derails a person.
well, yeah, I was gonna say, like, even though that's our experience, like, for other people, that did deter their
That's
faith,
what I'm saying.
and you can't blame them, like
Of course
and I
not.
think this goes back to you and I were talking about this earlier. You know, a lot of people think, right, well, Jesus didn't do that to you, it's the person, but the Bible says that Jesus, right, he's the head and the church is the body. So, how the body treats people is a representation of Christ. It
Yeah.
actually doesn't work that way. Like, biologically, when people harm you who say they are Christian, it has an impact on your relationship with the Lord.
Yeah.
It
That's
doesn't,
kind of what I'm saying.
yeah, and, like, it really upsets me when I hear that, like, there's all these things, like, little whatever quotes and little, like, I don't know, Canva things all over the internet about that, and I'm
Like
like,
what? What do you mean?
just about, like, God didn't hurt you, or the church might have hurt you, but God didn't.
Oh,
And,
I
like,
see. Okay.
okay, like, on a personal level, I'm like, yeah, I'm actually at this point in my healing, I am able to parcel out, like,
Yeah.
for me, again, I'm not putting this
It's
on
fair.
anybody. I'm able to say, yeah, Lord, I know that wasn't you. Like, I actually know that wasn't your heart and intention for me. However,
Right.
it did impact my faith
Okay.
life.
That's what I'm trying to
It has
say.
majorly
Yeah.
impacted my faith life,
Yeah.
and so for us to say like, "Oh, well, you know, you shouldn't put your trust in people." It's like,
Yeah. No,
"No, like
that's a non-starter.
you're we are a representation of God to people in the world, whether you like that or not. That's why it matters how we treat people." And
Yeah.
I just want to go on a little rant for a minute
Yeah.
because we
Please.
were talking about this. Like, it really, really bothers me about this stuff. Like, we don't care really who people are on the inside anymore. That's
Hmm.
what really upsets me. Like, we care way more about this stuff. What can you do? How can you perform? What can you
Metrics.
produce? Who
Yeah.
are you? How can you gather a crowd?
Yep.
That is way more important than, like, can you love? Can you sit with people in your pain?
Right.
Can you show empathy to somebody who's crying? Can you speak kindly to somebody? Like, are you integrous? And, like, it bothers me that that doesn't matter anymore. And you know what it actually does? It not only does harm to the body and the people who are in the church, it actually harms the people on the stage, because if you think
Mm.
about it, their whole identity is wrapped up in that.
Yeah.
They're finding worth in that. Like, we actually, like, cheapen them
We're
too.
doing them a
We're
disservice.
and they start to believe, well, people only like me, people only value me because I'm doing this. And so
Yeah.
it continues that cycle.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
it's messed up, and it really bothers me, and I think that's been, like, the biggest source of pain in our own process. When I think back on Texas and our community there,
Yeah.
right, this community was really focused on all this type of stuff, like revival and kingdom wealth and all of the things,
Right.
but yet I never experienced such a lack of kindness and care in my whole
You're
life.
telling
Like,
me.
I never experienced such a lack of love among Christians. I've never experienced
Hmm.
the level of harm and mistreatment from people who claim to know God.
Oh my
I
gosh.
felt like completely disposed of,
Dude.
disregarded, disrespected,
Used up.
uncared for, used up.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm really upset about that. And, like, I could go on and on about this, but even as recently, like, I kind of took a risk to step back into kind of a Christian space that I felt like was maybe going to be a healing experience. And
Yeah.
while there have been really wonderful, supportive, amazing people in that space, I also experienced a re traumatization. Like, it was extremely painful for me
Hmm.
to go back in a space even after I've healed, even
Yeah.
after I've done all this work to, like, know who I am and feel more confident, and just bam, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, like the and I don't like, that sounds really bad, but I'm like,
No, I don't
it
think so.
shows that we're not emphasizing this stuff that really matters. We're not sitting with people in the pain. We're not, like, tending to hearts.
Right.
And it doesn't build community. So, like, you can have all the revival and the numbers and the
Yeah.
prayer meetings and all the money you want, but if we can't sit with people who are in pain, if we can't treat people well, what are we even doing?
What's the
What
point?
is the point? Like,
Yeah.
that's how I feel right now. Like, what is the point in this? And this is why I won't, like, this is why I can't enter into community. It's why I can't go to church, because there isn't a place for hurting hearts. There isn't a place where it's actually valued. Like, this heart stuff is, like, completely valued anymore. It's
Yeah.
not.
Well, you've made the point too that you felt more safe in non-Christian trauma informed spaces than
Yeah.
Christian because we just simply I'll include myself in this. We just cannot for the life of us relate to other humans as humans.
No, we have
It
to
is like
spiritualize
this
everything. Yeah.
as hard as we try, we just can't fricking do it. And I mean, I'm so out of the habit of relating to Christians, that when I do, it's like foreign. It feels foreign.
Yeah.
It's actually more refreshing to me to talk to non-believers or atheists or because they're very real. They're
Yeah.
very real people, and there's also a lot of empathy. Even with
Yes, so
somebody
much
who
empathy.
I might completely disagree with on politics
Yeah.
or uh, economic theory or whatever it is, intellectually, you could totally disagree with that person,
Yeah.
but they have empathy.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't really care what you believe. If you've got empathy as a human, I can connect with you. And then conversely, if I can set aside my dogmatic convictions about whatever subject and have empathy towards you as a person,
Yes, that's such a
then
good
I
point.
think we can probably play ball in this world. But
Totally.
unless and until we can do that, you're right. There is no point. Like what are we actually doing?
Yeah, and that goes like yeah, what you said was so good, like the empathy thing. Yeah, and I have felt more comfortable sadly in, I hate to say it, like secular space. I don't even look that
I don't
I'm using the word
yeah,
secular for the sake of the audience, but I don't even think of I just look at people as people now.
right.
I'm like, "Okay, you're a person who believes in Jesus. You're a person who doesn't." I don't even like that language anymore. It
Yeah.
can feel so dehumanizing. It's like othering. It's like, "Oh,
The
you're in the
us and
good
them.
camp or it's
Right.
just like you're a human who deserves love, you're valuable, whatever."
Yeah.
But yes, I tend to feel these days more comfortable around people who aren't Christian because of the empathy thing. And because too like yeah, like it's like people are like, you're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to like I have to talk about emotions almost every episode, but it's like it's a big problem in the church. Like the fullness of our humanity is we are wired with emotions. Like you're biologically you feel things. And we're told those things are bad things to feel. There's no emotions that are bad. But we're
Mhm.
like when you tell people if you feel an emotion that you're opening a door to the demonic, like people are going to be terrified to feel anything.
Right,
So
or just repressed.
but that's what's refreshing about outside of some of these Christian spaces is, like, you can actually just come as yourself. Like, you're actually more welcomed as yourself,
Mhm.
just sad. But you
Yeah.
brought up another good point. We were talking about that, like, if you're able to have empathy, which is the ability to see something from somebody else's perspective. We're
Mm.
really not that great at that in the
No.
church, like, because of the narrow, like, beliefs that we're taught. We're not taught, right, how to think for ourselves
Right.
or how to consider other options, and I feel like this is such a big problem, like, sitting with discomfort, you know? I think that in order to do that, in order to be empathetic, in order to consider, right, another person's perspective is, like, the ability to sit with our own discomforting emotions. Like, it's uncomfortable for me to consider, right, a belief system outside of my own, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
there's gonna be a discomfort or fear that might come up in me.
Yeah.
So that's hard to do.
Yeah, it is hard because we I think naturally we as humans probably gravitate towards people who are like us,
Yeah.
like whether it be socioeconomic status or you gravitate towards other people in the same profession or career because there's commonality. And then in our case, within the hypercharismatic movement, we have associated with many others who have, and really, I think deep down, it is the commonality has been people who are unsatisfied with the status quo. If you think about it, if you just take a little quick look at people that we've rubbed shoulders with over the years, great people, just like us who have been in these movements. And I would say the common theme is everybody wanted something more in life than what they had, which is, I think, a beautiful thing.
You mean in the charismatic
Right,
movement
in
that
the
we've yeah.
charismatic group or
Mm.
charismatic church. So I guess getting back to it's normal humanity to gravitate towards people that are like you.
Yes,
You know
totally.
what I mean?
Yeah.
But on the flip side, like you said, that also can, a strength can be a weakness as well, which is, you can gravitate towards so many people that are like you that you also in the process it's almost like you set aside and don't consider all of these other people who have a totally different perspective or life understanding or belief system.
Can I say something about that? Like,
Yeah.
it made me think of this, like, what we avoid becomes even more uncomfortable, like, with avoidance. So, for example, it made me think of this, like, right, in the church, we're taught, like, unbelievers, right? Like, people who don't believe in Christ were kinda like they're kind of like, "Oh," you know?
Yeah.
And what comes with that is a fear. So there's, like,
Yeah.
an avoidance, like, "Oh, unbelievers, I gotta stick to my people that are like me."
Mhm.
But what happens is the more you like, completely separate yourself from people who aren't like you, the avoidance of that, it's more uncomfortable to engage.
Yeah, because don't you
Yeah,
become more distant? You don't interact with them.
yeah,
So you almost develop this image of who people are, but you actually don't know how they are because you
yes,
haven't spent time with them.
yes.
And so and then you look at where we are in the United States, we're so polarized right
Oh,
now around
yes.
politics,
So glad you
which
brought
I
that up.
will not touch whatsoever on that. However, I will say this, we are so polarized and the us versus them makes
So
its
bad.
way out into the public sphere and the public square where like no matter where you stand on the political thing, just as soon as you run across somebody who has a different output or I'm not output, outlook, you may not have even interacted with many people like that in that camp, but you've already made an assumption about them. I'm just saying you generally. I don't know. I'm not talking about any specific people right now. I'm just saying generally. And you've already made your opinion about that group, whoever those people are, without even interacting with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think yeah.
It's like preemptive, um, I don't know what you would call that. I don't even know if there's a word for that.
There probably is. I think there is,
Yeah.
but I can't think of it. No, I'm so glad you brought that up. And yeah, we like to kind of stay out of politics just because it is completely divisive. Like, we have our opinions and we vote. But I think I will say this. Like, I've been very sad, and yeah, very sad how politics has come into the church in the way that it has.
Yeah.
I'll just say that. And here's what's really odd for me where I'm at now, because I've kind of had my own journey with politics,
Mhm.
and I'm more able at this point in time with my healing, because the more healing you experience, like, you're more flexible in your nervous system, which means you actually
That's
can
cool.
be objective. You actually are not black and white thinking is like, my side's good, your side's
Yeah, it's
evil.
like, what is that? The,
That's
lizard brain that does
yeah, it's
that? Yeah.
very black and white. So again, and this is a touchy subject, but I'm just saying, like, objectivity, right? Like, a healthy nervous system is able to be like, okay, well, let me just look at the facts and let me use my critical thinking and let me come to my own conclusions. And I was telling Adam, like, it's crazy. Like, I go on Twitter and following people on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, like, you read this and it's like, wow, like, that's very convincing. And then read this, wow, that's very convincing. It's like you've got these two polar opposites. And it makes me sad because yeah, it's weaponized against each other. Some of the examples are so extreme.
Mhm.
And it's not just in politics, it's in the church too. We're unable to hold objectivity and look at facts, and we other people.
Yeah.
You're on that side, I'm on this side. You're good or bad, or I'm good and you're bad, whatever. Like, and it's sad. It's doesn't create connection when we can't. And I think some of this, I'm kind of going on a rant too,
That's fine. Go ahead.
some of it, like, I think is social media related. Like, you think about when you have conversations in person, we're much more kind to people, like, in person that are
Well, some
different to
people are.
some people. Most people I
Yeah,
think are,
probably
like,
so.
you would say things differently to
Yeah, you
somebody in
wouldn't
person
blast somebody like you
than
would.
you would on the internet, and so I think that's some of it, but, yeah, anyways, I think it's sad that we're at this point, and I think, like, if we wanna see healing in the church and we wanna have healthy communities, I think we're gonna have to grow in our ability to be more flexible and objective, to really see that the people on the other side are not the
The
enemies,
enemy. Yeah.
and hold space and room for looking at facts and coming to our own conclusions and not letting the media or other people define reality for us. And I think
Right.
that's what's happening. Like, reality is being defined for us. And again, even if you do your own homework, people, right, we come to our conclusions. But
Yeah.
I just think in general, like, for me personally, I'm working really hard to not other people in the politics realm, like really listen to both sides. I have my
Yeah.
opinions, but I'm looking at people more from the standpoint of a person and like how can I connect with them versus like,
Yeah.
do you agree with my political side? And
Yeah.
that's been really helpful. Like
Yeah.
it feels really good to be in that place because I wasn't in that place a few years ago.
Yeah.
Talking a lot.
No, you're fine. Yeah, I don't really have much to add to that. I agree. I think
Yeah.
that seeing behind whatever the belief system is, whether it's politics or whatever, there is a person back there that you're talking
Yeah.
to, and none of us are perfect at this. We all
No.
we all say things that we probably wish we wouldn't have and want to go back and change.
Oh
And that's
Lord, I
probably
do. Yeah.
normal human thing, but yeah. Um but we were taught in the hypercharismatic movements. It's interesting. I've talked to John Collins about this. Uh, we were taught, I don't know. I don't want to use the word dogmatic because I have a different, uh, I have a different opinion on dogmatism and dogma, which I've actually seen in different contexts, non-charismatic contexts. That's actually quite malicious. But I will say this: we were pumped full of a certain way to believe
Yeah.
in the hypercharismatic
Yeah.
movements. Would you agree?
Oh yeah.
There are specific tenets of faith that are very widely held and emphasized. Okay, so when you're in a group like that or in a movement like that, it's very easy to take that way of thinking and transfer it to other areas, such as politics,
Yeah.
or I don't know. I can't think of another example right now. But it's very easy to superimpose that to where you begin to live in this, or not live, you begin to think that you're in this um world where everything is black and white
Yeah.
and there's no gray area, and you happen to have the right answers about everything, which that's actually kind of scary place to be
Yeah.
if you think about it.
It is. Yeah. And I've definitely been there lots of times. I mean, I still have black and white thinking in certain areas.
Yeah,
Like right now, like my feelings about the church, I mean, because of my own pain and trauma, I'm like, ooh, like
that's
I've
true.
got some black and white there. But
Hmm.
I think the difference is if you can write. I think it's helpful if you know that. Like you know your areas. Like, yeah, I'm black and white here right now. I'm in process.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think where we can see flexibility in our lives, I think that's a healthy place to be when we notice that we can be kind of flexible and I don't think that means you can't have absolutes, right? Like I think there are some
Right.
absolutes in life. Like for me, that's my faith, like that's an absolute in
Hmm.
Jesus. But you know what I mean? Like I don't know, I think that goes without saying.
Yeah.
One of the other things I was thinking about was we talked about earlier was kind of on this along these lines were just about kind of like theology. Like I noticed like a lot of conversations I've gotten into lately have been around like certain theologies, right? That we're all deconstructing and kind of
Okay.
examining.
Like
And
stuff we were taught at Bethel.
yeah,
Yeah.
which I think is good and healthy that we're all doing that and like important. But I realize like, I don't know, like I think too that like theology isn't always a connection point, right? If you're trying to create
It rarely
community,
is.
it's like
It rarely is, I
I
think.
think sometimes that can like be a form of like almost self-protection, right? I don't know, does that make sense?
Yeah, like you can eloquently explain what you believe about God, but then behind all that, you might be the most insecure person, full of pain, and have no answer for your own personal demons that you're facing, right? But you can put together a dang good, eloquent theological argument,
Yeah.
you know. So it's those two things are not necessarily mutually inclusive, if that makes sense. So I'll give you another
Yeah.
example. I've actually been kicking this around in my head. I don't even know if I told you this. How you can, so I go back to Bethel or even Morning Star IHOP for a minute, be caught up in an ecstatic worship experience, right? Where you've got just you feel the presence of God so strongly, And I know some people say, well, that's just the music making you feel good. Okay, whatever. Whatever you want to call that, whether it's God's presence, you want to call it that, or you just feel good because the music was awesome. Okay. You can go from that experience, or even if you're one of the people on the stage playing the music, you can go from that experience to having an argument with your spouse or your kids immediately before or after. And it's as if neither affect the other. But the fact is, they do. And I think that this is a compartmentalization of faith and life. I don't know. Faith life sounds weird. I don't really, faith life is not what I'm trying to say, but like life and faith, like those two areas should not be compartmentalized.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
There should
Yeah,
be,
okay.
there actually truly is a connection between if you had a fight with your wife and then you get up on stage and you're leading worship, like, oh my gosh, the presence of God was awesome. But the people,
You're
worshiping,
closest with, yeah.
they know, hey, y'all, we just had a fight right before church started. I don't know. I'm just kind of rambling, but I'm trying to make the point that that is actually connected. Like
Yeah.
these little areas are connected, and I forgot how we got on that subject.
No, I was just talking about theology. Like, I was
Theology,
thinking
that
about
was
some of
it.
the, online communities I'm part of, and like we're talking about theology. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. I think theology can be a connection point, but I think I was just for my own self, I was like, like I'm engaging with people like sometimes around theology and not around like actual connection. And like connection does require some vulnerability.
Vulnerability, yeah.
And again, it's like I think that's what creates community is and again, not forced vulnerability, not that we go and like I think I think we've done that really wrong in the charismatic to like come in and just, open up the closet and share everything. Like that's not what I'm saying.
Mhm.
But I think that there's a growing in right in intimacy and connection that feels safe.
Yeah.
And when it's safe, you feel like you want to share a little more and you want to share a little more. It shouldn't like right, if community is all cognitive based on theological principles and theologies and performance, um, that's not what opens up our hearts. Like what happens with that is we start to like go into self-protection. We actually start to like close off. Like because performance-based stuff is like, it's not like, what am I trying to say? It's not you living from your authentic self.
Yeah, yeah,
And so
it's
it's like again, it's
external.
like these barriers to connection and building community. Like there has to be vulnerability, there has to be safety, like
Mhm.
a little bit of like slowly opening and like moving towards a place where people can carry your burdens and you can share pain.
Yeah.
And I think if we're gathering around, right, performative stuff and miracles and signs and wonders and revival, like are we gathering around hearts that are getting like needs tended to, right?
Mhm. Yeah. What would be cool is if you did have all that in place, like the community stuff, and then, oh, and by the way, we had some healings too while we're
Yeah,
at
of
it,
course.
you
Yeah.
know?
Why can't it be both? Yeah, it
Yeah.
can. And I think in some places there are. And I think we've even experienced that. I mean, I think even during our time at Bethel, like I definitely there was a
Yeah, it
lot
was,
of really healthy connections that we had
yeah,
personally and we saw miracles and stuff. And
we did.
it was awesome. But I think it's gotten really away from that. And it's
Yeah,
to the yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, just the kind of where Bethel was when we left in 2011 versus what it's at now. I mean, in some ways, it's unrecognizable. Like
Yeah.
it looks like a big corporate machine, money making just machine. And as far as how people are being treated there, I have no idea. I mean, yeah, actually, I do
Yeah,
have an
you
idea.
do.
I do have an idea. Come to think of it,
Yeah.
how people are being treated there in the more recent, years. Um, Not to say that there aren't some positives out there, but there are a lot of people who have been left for dead, and there are a lot of people who have left that environment and have been forgotten, and they don't matter anymore.
Yeah.
And the fact is, like, an organization of that size simply cannot, the way it's currently structured, cannot care for people properly.
Absolutely. That's what I was gonna say. Like, there's a lot
It's
of
it's
yeah.
it's it's like trying to fix. It's like trying to put a screen door on a submarine. You can cover that screen door with 7 layers of duct tape. You can put saran wrap on it. You can put plastic Tupperware on that screen door, but it is not going to keep the water from coming into the submarine. And the problem isn't to put a band-aid on the structure. The
Yeah.
problem is to let the structure melt down, and let's get back to what the structure should be,
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
actually very flat and
Yeah.
not a pyramid.
And I think that's what's hard. Again, we're all in our own journey. We're all in different places, but a lot of people are like, "Oh, but if we just talk to them and they could just do this." And I'm thinking,
People have
inside,
been trying to do that.
well, and we're like like you said, like the just the size of it itself and the weak spots within the structure, that like that doesn't work. Like it's too big to
But it
actually shepherd and
yeah,
pastor the people that are there well. You know, like what's needed to do that is it's just not possible. And I
but it would help if Bill and Chris would listen, and maybe they are, I don't know. But it would help if the senior leaders would actually listen to the people that are blowing the whistle, like, and are crying, like, please help. We're laying in the road. We got run over. We're bleeding out. Help us. Do something.
oh, but they do. You can just go get a sozo and all your problems will be fixed in one session.
Well, I think that on top of that, like, Bill's answer is to not complain.
Oh my gosh. I just saw
So I'm not operating in faith right now because I'm complaining.
I just saw a
Okay.
particular post. I'm not gonna mention who it is because you will probably know, but there's a negativity fast for Lent. And I'm like,
Mm.
again, on the surface, that sounds really, really good.
I
But
don't
if
think it
you have,
sounds good on the
well, no,
surface.
I mean, if you're in the like, oh, negativity, we're not supposed to be negative. Okay, let's fast negativity. That actually is suppression.
And bypass it.
If you're feeling negative, there's a reason for it.
Right.
There's a good
Okay.
reason for it. Wait,
I'm
let me
gonna give.
finish my train of thought for
Okay, go
just a
ahead. Go
second.
ahead. I want to say that after.
If you're feeling negative, it's something to get curious about. What we are taught is to get it to go away.
Hmm.
I always say this. I feel like I talk about the same thing every time. Your emotions are good and they hold valuable information. So if you're negative, there's a good reason why you're negative. And if you can connect to it and get curious, you actually might find out like there's probably pain underneath the negativity.
Yeah.
So if you just try to get the negativity go away, you're actually not getting to the root of why the negativity is there. People think the symptom is the problem,
Yeah.
but there's a root here. Same with bitterness, same with complaining. Like there's pain. There's something there.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so to like we're just not gonna do it. You're actually causing it to
Be more.
grow.
Yeah.
So it's like, I just see that and I'm like, again, like from a mental health perspective, I'm like, oh my gosh, we're like, you're the heart behind it, I think,
Uh, I don't
is to
know.
try.
I don't even think I could see a heart behind it at this point.
I don't know people's hearts, to be
I mean,
honest.
yeah,
So
I don't either, but like,
I
but I was
cringe
just gonna
though.
say, like, it reminds me. I had a mentor years ago who I really respected, had a tremendous impact on my life. But he used to say, he used to talk about how, you these warning signs or these emotions that we feel, they're kind of like a check engine light. And we
Yes.
we want to go in and take a hammer and hit the let me come in and hit the check engine light and make that darn thing quit lighting up. I'm gonna hit that check engine like right here. I'm gonna hit it and that oh great, my check engine light went off. But see, the engine still needs servicing. It didn't fix the problem.
Yeah. Well,
It's
just
still there's still a heck of a lot going on under the hood that needs addressing right now.
well, yeah, and what happens is you bang the engine light and it breaks and you think you fixed it, but it's going to come out as rage, it's going to come out as anxiety, it's going to come out as depression. So your fasting negativity is going to come out as rumination in your thoughts, panic attack. Like
Yeah,
it has to go somewhere. It's meant to like
yeah.
be processed and move through. So it's like yeah, and it's just I wanna my heart and desire is like, can we create a community where that's allowed? Like,
Mhm.
I think about again, the Psalms. I love the Psalms because I'm like, the dude complained all the time and I really relate to him. He was mad and he was angry, and I really get David, like
Yeah.
in that regard.
Not the other
Not
stuff.
the way that David's used to
By Mike
Yeah,
Bickle. Yeah, I
no,
know. Yeah.
not that part about David, but the part about
Yeah.
David where he was, like, complaining and whiny and all of
Yeah, he
that.
was
I'm like,
he was
"Dude,"
honest. Yeah, he was
I'm
totally
like,
honest about yeah.
"You and me, I get you, brother."
Mhm. Yeah, we're not gonna replicate,
No, not that part, not that part. But no, but, like, I
yeah.
appreciate that, like, it's actually in the Bible, people complaining and
Right. That's what I said that
angry.
last time, like, when Bill put up that thing about how did it go? Complaining is a lack of faith or something. I'm like, dude, there's so much complaining in the Bible.
Oh, yeah.
Lord, there's so much. Um, oh man, this gets me riled up
Yeah, it
because
got me a little riled up too. That's a hot button, like,
yeah,
the denial of, emotions and
I think that honestly, I was talking to somebody about this the other week or something about Thomas. But everybody calls him Doubting Thomas.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, everybody gives him a bad rap because he wanted to actually see Jesus's hands and his side. He wanted to
Yeah.
stick his fingers in that wound, which is gross, by the way. I would never want to do that. Um, but he wanted to touch Jesus's wounds and see it for his eyes, or with his eyes, and he said, "Unless I see it, and with my own eyes, I won't believe." And of course, we took that verse in Protestantism and we spun it around and we bashed Thomas. But you know what? I think Thomas is one of the heroes of the
Oh
faith.
my gosh, I love that story.
And we call him Doubting Thomas, but like, isn't that faith though? Like,
Yes.
you actually he wrestled with. I don't actually know if this is the Son of God. I need some verification here. You know,
Yeah.
and this relates to the conversation I've been having with John Collins over the past several months about verification of miracles,
Yeah.
verification of healings. And like there was sort of this subconscious belief system that if you were to seek to verify a miracle with a doctor verified like x-ray or MRI or whatever it is, blood work, then that's a lack of faith. But do you realize how actually that is an expression of faith?
Yeah.
Because you were going to seek out the truth of the matter. And Thomas did that. He went in and he wanted to seek out the truth. Did this actually happen to him? Is he who he said he was?
No, I it's so funny you said that because I just put up a Facebook post about this. I talked about Thomas and I talked about Peter. Those are my 2 favorite stories. I same thing, like, if you look at the Bible, there's no reference of them calling him Doubting Thomas, like, some pastor made that up, and it's not true. I
Hmm,
actually think that the story of Thomas is actually one of the most beautiful pictures of the kindness and tenderness
hmm,
and care of Jesus towards a doubting
mm,
believer.
mhm,
And I think even with, Peter, I talked about when Peter saw Jesus on the water, he's like, "Lord, is that you?" And he's like, "Come out to me."
mhm,
He was drowning, right? And then God, like, grabbed his hand and but I thought about that and, like, Jesus could have not grabbed his hand and been like, "You're good, you won't drown, keep going, buddy."
or you don't have enough faith.
But he didn't do that, like, he
Yeah.
reached out, like, and same with Thomas. He showed up to him and showed him the scars, and I think it's such a beautiful picture of how God treats us, like, those of us who doubt or have
Mm, which we all
questions,
do.
which we're told the opposite of that. Like, we are shamed when we have doubt. We are shamed when we have questions. We are shamed when we, right, aren't sure if we believe something in the Bible or like struggling to or not, like,
Mm,
and I think that those are examples of how, like Jesus like met people where they were and they wrestled and they struggled and they in their faith. And I really, really love those
it's
examples.
yeah, me too.
It's so
Yeah.
encouraging, especially through this process of where there's so much of that in this deconstruction.
Yeah.
There's so many questions. There's so much doubt. There's so much I'm not sure anymore, Lord, about so much. And so to like, I don't know, when I read those stories, they're like super encouraging,
Mm,
especially in this season.
yeah. I'm glad we talked about that.
Yeah.
That was
I feel like
yeah.
there's more with that. I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Where should we go?
Yeah, I don't know either. I think just and we kind of say this every time, but giving yourself permission to do just that. You know, whatever that looks like in your situation. I know I'm thinking about that in my life, like, hmm, the things I'm wrestling through
Yeah.
about, you hear people now when I hear somebody say, well, I had an encounter with God, I'm like, I want to actually ask God about it. Like, was that you? I mean, that seems kind of like a dumb no brainer, but like, trust but verify kind of thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to just take, and I mean, I don't want to not take it either, but I also want to take it with some verification.
Yeah,
I
like there's
won't,
some healthy skepticism that's like okay. Like it's okay to now, right? To have some skepticism
I
and
mean,
ask questions.
to be fair, most of the time I don't even believe it nowadays. Like if somebody says God told me, I'm just like, I completely tune out. I'm like, no, I don't think God told you.
We should talk about that for a second.
Okay.
That's something that we're told a lot in these prophetic,
Yeah.
our prophetic movements, like God says, God told me, God, blah, blah, blah. But
Yeah.
I've completely moved away from that, like, for a lot of reasons, realizing like how much harm that does. Like,
So much.
what if you hear God wrong, which we
We
do,
all do.
and
Or,
you've told somebody God said, like, so I'm like,
mm,
I just started to say, I think, or I'm sensing or feeling this, and leave God out of it. If that person wants to take that as God's, they can, but I feel like that's something I've been more cautious about. Like that, those are really hefty words that can do, I think, a
yeah,
lot of damage. And I'm not saying I think there's a place for that, right? But like I think that for me, realizing how much damage the prophetic movement and using God's name
yeah,
for things when we can totally hear wrong. We only see in part, right? Like I don't use those words anymore.
ditto.
And that feels really good because it's taking the pressure off me. Like, I don't need to be a voice piece for God. Like, God
Right.
is capable
Right.
of confirming and speaking things
Yeah.
for himself to people.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing with like, yeah, with Sean, it's like he told somebody that prophetic word and they took that to mean this is for my
Yeah.
life.
Yeah.
Like I think
Absolutely.
it's important to be mindful of like how we're using words like that.
I don't even feel comfortable with saying, and I don't know if I think I haven't said this in years, but like, I feel like the Lord blank.
Oh yeah.
I like
Yeah.
when that sounds icky to me.
Well,
I
and half
don't,
the time it's not the
I,
Lord, it's
I
that
don't,
person's opinion.
yeah, I don't want that. I don't want to
Me
have
either.
that in my life. I don't want
Totally.
to hear from people who say that
Oh
or
yeah.
anything. Like it just feels yucky to me.
Totally yucky.
So,
I think it's
like,
important. Yeah.
these are the areas where the manipulative hooks gain
Yeah.
entry.
Yes.
Okay. And it is the exploitation of a person's legitimate hunger for God. That's where the hook gets in. And then bam, next thing you know, you're hooked. You're down the line for a couple few years and you've actually been spiritually manipulated.
Yeah, and what's sad is like we don't I feel like okay, I'm going to be like use spiritual language here for a minute. Like actually I feel like there's not like a holy reverence for saying that anymore where it's almost like we were taught that like
All the time.
I can just say whatever I want in God's name. I can prophesy and say whatever I want and say that it's God and there's like you know what I'm saying? Like, there's not a
Yeah.
reverence for that. Like, do you realize the severity of what you just said? Like, you just told this person that you're speaking on behalf of God for them. And, like, yes, we have to, like, be able to discern and sift through, right? If we want to receive a word from somebody. But I'm saying, like, somebody doesn't know that. And, someone who just walked in a church and they don't, they're,
Right.
I just,
And especially if you're operating in dark power
right.
and
Yeah.
or even if you're operating in legit, like not dark power, like God power, and you misuse it,
Yeah.
like see how that can harm somebody so deeply.
So deeply.
But there's something I was going to say about that a minute ago, but
Sorry to
I
interrupt you.
forgot. No, you're fine. I forgot now, but
Well, I
we're
hope it comes
probably
back.
pretty close to an hour at this point. Oh, we're over an hour, so Maybe we should wrap.
Okay.
What
I
do you
did
think?
feel like there was one more thing though.
Okay.
What was it?
I don't know.
It was in regards to oh, yeah, I guess that's kind of maybe it can be a closing thought and you can add to it. I was just thinking, I was reading different blogs from people and just, so many different friends and people from past communities that are deconstructing and disentangling and reconstructing their faith and just hearing, everybody's in such different places,
Mhm.
which
Yeah.
is normal. And I think what's hard about this is like we're not all in the same place and we're not
Yeah.
all gonna land in the same place. You know what I'm saying? Like we're all gonna it's all gonna look different. And
Mhm.
I think some of the things that I was hearing, like a common theme among some of the people was about like how that might be perceived by other people.
How I don't know. I
Like
don't understand.
their process, like they're concerned about, well, this is where I'm at now in my faith and how might other people interpret that. You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Okay.
And I guess I just wanted to speak to that for a minute. Like,
Mm.
yeah, like how uncomfortable this process is. And I think we've been in it for so long
Mhm.
that I'm so used to people maybe perceiving, right? Like people could look at our life and think, oh my gosh, Adam and Melissa have, left the faith or, without really knowing our
Yeah.
story, just a judgment, right? Like, or a perception of us, or they believe weird things or whatever, or they've, gone off the deep end. And it's uncomfortable, but I guess I what was my point in bringing this up?
Well, just I think everybody's on their own journey.
Yeah, and that it's I think too just, um yeah, because we've been in this place for a long time too, just encouraging you that, like, to try to just focus on where you're at and, like and I know that can be hard how people perceive you, but to remember that you know where you're at
Mm.
and, like, that's okay, and yeah, like, again, I'm telling you something that's probably easier said than
Said than done.
done, but,
Yeah.
like, kind of, like, detaching from what people might think of your process right now and how people might perceive that or how they might define that. Like, it's really uncomfortable. Like, it's uncomfortable at times for me knowing people that, like, I went to church with who probably perceive things about me
Yeah.
that aren't true. And I've just had
Yeah.
to learn to let that go and just really trust, like, I know where I'm at. I know my process. They don't know the pain I walked through. They don't know the trauma I've been through. They don't know what I've endured
Mhm.
to be in this place. Like it's a miracle where you're at, wherever you're at. Like the fact that you're here and you've gotten through what you've been through, is hard. You've been through some things. And so I guess just encouraging you to try to, yeah, detach a little bit from what others might perceive about your process and that it's okay and that you know where you're at. And
Mm.
um yeah, I just sensed as stuff I was reading and just hearing that was like a little bit of a source of pain for people, like,
Mm.
and just that it's okay and that it'll get easier. It'll get easier.
Will it?
It does get easier letting go of what people think about
Okay.
that.
I see.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
No, I agree with you. Yeah.
I remember
Especially when you've lost a lot,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
because you're like, well, what else can I lose?
Yeah,
I
we've
mean,
lost so much. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. From the standpoint of community and spiritual, yeah, we've kind of lost it all there.
I'll just say
Yeah.
this one last thing, like, I remember, like, when we were in Texas and we didn't go to church, and that was, like, really uncomfortable for me. I'd, like, never imagined I would never not go to church, like
Yeah.
and I remember I was doing hair at the time, and, like, clients were like, "Oh, where do you go to church?" And I remember, like, inside, I'd kind of, like, freeze and freak out, and I'd be like, "Oh, we're a part of a home," and, like, really felt the need to kind of explain myself, and it was really uncomfortable for a while.
Hmm.
And now I'm, like, thinking if people ask me that, I'm like, "Well, I'm healing from religious trauma and spiritual abuse. I was part of a cult, and so I'm really healing." Like, I would have no problem laying out the reasons why I don't feel comfortable in church now.
Yeah, me
Yeah,
too. Like that doesn't even enter my mind. Like, first of all, I haven't been asked that in I don't know how long,
I know.
probably 10 plus years.
Yeah.
I just don't rub shoulders with people that would ask me that. Like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like saying, it's like, when's the last time somebody asked you, uh, I don't know what color the sky is. I'm not sure,
Yeah. It's like such a
but
foreign question.
yeah,
But anyways, yeah, I just, that was like 14 years ago. That question was uncomfortable. And now I'm like, you know what? This is where I'm at.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I don't know if that, and you can take it or leave it, but yeah, your journey is your own and it
Yeah.
gets to be your own and no one gets to define it for you. Don't let somebody define where you're at. And
Mm.
like, again, whether you're a believer or not, if you are, like, God is with you. Like, there is nothing that can separate you. No part of your process or doubt or fear or questions or whatever can separate him from your process. And so I think oh, hello, thumbs up.
The thumbs up.
Anyways, I just wanted to say that
That's good.
for whatever it's
Thanks
worth to
for
anybody.
yeah, thanks for adding that. I think that was important and good way to land the
Yeah.
plane. So we appreciate y'all being here. It was a little longer tonight, but thanks as always for being here. We do solicit your feedback, your
Yeah.
comments, and your thoughts. Please let us know. We do have an email address, which is gritinthewild@gmail.com. So GRITINTHEWILD@gmail.com. Or just leave us a comment. We'll do our best to reply. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.